United States, Russia, China, and Venezuela. How are they connected? And most importantly, why are they connected? Is it oil or is it other reasons? So on January 3rd, 2026, the world watched as Operation Absolute Resolve so United States forces captured Nicolás Maduro. It was the moment the Donroe Doctrine, a hyper-aggressive update to the 200-year-old Monroe Doctrine, became official policy. Not just talking about regime change, we're talking about total reclamation of the Americas. So why did Washington wait until 2026 to pull this trigger? The Donroe Doctrine is a policy that tells Russia and China one thing.
You can't park this, huh?
By removing Maduro, Washington didn't just target a dictator, they targeted Chinese infrastructure and Russian military footprints in America's backyard. Now, I don't know if you guys remember the Russian warships in Cuba back in June or July of 2024, as well as the nuclear-powered sub that was also seen in Cuba. Now, to the Panama Canal. In late 2024 and early 2025, the U.S. began demanding Panama return control of the canal, citing excessive rates and Chinese influence since Chinese companies own two major ports at the canal's ends. Okay, this doctrine views the canal as stolen American property. The United States built the Panama Canal between 1904 and 1914 after taking over the project from France. The United States officially began construction on May 4th, 1904. The canal was officially opened on August 15, 1914, following successful trials in 1913. In this new era, sovereignty in the Americas has become conditional on being aligned with the United States' interests. While the United States claims this brings stability, it has sent shockwaves through the global system, forcing countries like Brazil and Colombia to choose sides in a way they haven't had to in a century.
A president taking a particular interest in Latin America is nothing new, as Mo Rocca reminds us.
A resurgence of the Monroe Doctrine, which says...
The Monroe Doctrine. Well, go back to the couple of hundred-year-old Monroe Doctrine.
Yes, the Monroe Doctrine, that thing you learned about in high school, is suddenly a hot topic. You wrote a book on the Monroe Doctrine.
Yes, I did.
Has your phone been blowing up?
My 5 minutes of fame turned into a week of fame.
University of Missouri's Jay Sexton wrote about how just 3 paragraphs in an 1823 address by President James Monroe have been used to justify U.S. actions in Latin America ever since. Monroe's original message was to Europe, stay out of the Americas.
It wasn't a pronouncement of law or statute. It was simply a statement made by a president to Congress about what foreign powers could not do in the Western Hemisphere. That's it.
It was decades before that statement would be ordained a doctrine and invoked by President James K. Polk to justify war with Mexico and expand the U.S. by nearly half. Cut to 1904, and President Teddy Roosevelt brandishing his big stick and proclaiming his own corollary to the Monroe Doctrine.
He's the key figure. And when Roosevelt looks at the Caribbean and Central America, he sees instability. He sees concerns that the European rivals might intervene. And he says in order to prevent that from happening, the United States needed to take preemptive action of its own.
Is part of the justification, well, we kept the Europeans out of this hemisphere, so you have to keep your house in order or we'll do it for you?
That's very much how Roosevelt put it.
The Marines return to the trouble spot, this time in force.
Enter the U.S. Marines, who by the 1920s were boots on the ground in half a dozen Latin American and Caribbean countries, attempting to stabilize them and, this is crucial, protect U.S. business interests, from bananas in Honduras to banks in Haiti. But these occupations soon became bloody quagmires, with hundreds of military and tens of thousands of civilian casualties.
They're known as the Banana Wars. These are the forever wars of their era. They begin to become very, very unpopular.
The Banana Wars ended with U.S. withdrawal from Haiti in 1934. After World War II, the Monroe Doctrine was barely mentioned.
Constitutes an explicit threat to the peace and security of all the Americas.
In 1962, when the Soviets sent missiles into Cuba, President John F. Kennedy had this to say.
He said, "The Monroe Doctrine, what the hell is that?"
But now it's back. Since last week's incursion into Venezuela, President Trump has cloaked his foreign policy in a once again revived Monroe Doctrine.
Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important.
What's going on here is a dominance war between the United States, Russia, and China. When you have multiple forms of power on the global level that don't align with each other or do not agree with each other, they're always going to be fighting for an edge over each other. And typically what happens is you have one power that's over the other two powers, or in this case over the other two powers. It happens in so many different varieties, but in this case we're talking about Russia, China, and the United States. And you have these two powers that are below the top power, so they're going to work together to try to get what they need or what they want to get that edge over the United States. Russia and China don't align on a lot of things. They do not align on agree on a lot of things, but one thing they do agree on is combating against the United States. Whether it's oil, natural resources, whatever it is, these countries will always be fighting. As long as they stay in power, will always be fighting for the edge. This video is coming in a 2-part series. Stay tuned for part 2.